Thank you for tuning in to the Peoplz and Dragons,
Haven City.
If you enjoy the content we provide,
an ugly city.
Then subscribe, like, and maybe
Episode
join in on
9.
the action at www.pndrpg.com.
We descend into what looks like the interior of an alien craft. Green dim viridian lights pulsate slowly along the floor. In the center, we see many tentacles forming a foundation for a thin, transparent surface of hard light. Appearing on it are holograms, images, and information. At the table sits the leaders of the Survey Day cult, General Rifmusen, sitting with both palms face down on the table, the darkness seeping out of him like a thick fog running along the glass. A man deep into the Takena arts, too deep. His head reattached, his soulless eyes set on crystal clear footage of his skirmish with Ivan Bakara projecting from the table, studying it like film. At the other end of the table, we see the glowing red eyes of an extremely thin and almost cadaverous human being. A corpse sitting upright at the table, his white hair laying over his gaunt face, wearing what looks like third-era armor but upgraded with highly advanced technology that seems to also be enchanted with magical properties, all partially concealed by the shadowy robe that wraps him, blending seamlessly with the shadows of the room. The Instigator is, in short, an evil mastermind. To elaborate, he is the creator of the Survey Day cult, an immortal mage whose origin and exact age are unknown, but goes way back before Haven was even thought of. And although slightly blasphemous within the Survey Day to speak this, some members of the inner circle believe that the Instigator was not even created by the Green Gods, unlike everything else. This was due to the fact that the Instigator developed and crafted the heart of the planet, Fisher of Emeralds, the Ichromancer. Technology on the level of that of the Green Gods. Though powerful in his nature, the Green Gods have appointed 3 leaders total, all exceptional in their purpose. They do, however, only willingly choose to speak through the Instigator. Rifmusen and the Instigator await their 3rd member when we see Anarchy 12's king enter the room and steps aside to guard the way. We see Seth Masters, also known as Anarchy 12, enter the room, accompanied by the Rook all the way to the table. Anarchy's spinning mechanical irises pan across the table, and though it was his 3rd time seeing the technologically marvelous furniture, Anarchy 12 still could appreciate perfected hard light technology. Anarchy's suit generates and warps into place a throne that Anarchy sits upon at the table. All 3 begin to speak on urgent matters regarding their global experiment codenamed Type 2, or as the Haven sheep call it, Emerald Prophecy. A process where, if done correctly, will produce the ultimate gamma type, or one that the Green Gods deem suitable. This was all done through nuclear and chemical warfare. This was all fairly new to Anarchy 12, but he is fast coming to grips with the fact that there is a shadow faction poisoning an entire planet with gamma radiation in order to make super mutants for aliens. Rifmusen speaks and puts forward his objectives, explaining the discovery of the G-Type 1 IB, referring to Ivan Bakara. The Instigator, receiving a telepathic thought directly from the Green Gods, turns to the General and relays that he is to target the realm, extract and destroy G1IB. Rifmusen tells the gods to consider it done and gives the news that G1KM has re-emerged and is not corrupted, and has decided to grant him the mantle of the Finder. The Instigator nods, and General Rifmusen takes his leave. The Instigator turns to Anarchy. Anarchy places one of his teeny swarm bots on the table. The Instigator eyeballs the tiny metallic emerald monstrosity and commends Anarchy on his beautiful creation. Anarchy thanks him for the chemicals he allowed him to use and stows it away, informing the Instigator that he will allow time for the next G-types to arrive before unleashing them. The Instigator thanks Anarchy for his assistance in his personal side project. Anarchy then signals the Rook to hand the instigator a tiny parcel. The instigator opens the parcel and pulls out a vial of Amplify serum retrieved during their attack on the gate center. The instigator informs Anarchy that the Green Gods thank him for his haste. Anarchy 12 shrugs off the thank yous and tells the instigator to remind the Green Gods of their end of the deal. The instigator nods and then points over to someone waiting by the entrance. We see an advocate, Cato V to be specific, decked out in his green suit and Survey Day pin on his lapel waiting for Anarchy. The instigator tells Anarchy that it will be fulfilled and he will see him in the next life. Anarchy then gets up and exits the room with Advocate. We cut to the instigator standing in his expansive and complicated laboratory. All across his holographic screens we see images and video of Kai Excalibur as well as the Abomination prior to the fusion. We learn that the instigator had imbued the ritual emerald that birthed the Abomination with a new variant and untested enchantment that required the frequency of Haven City to be more chaotic in order to work. The result created the ritual Abomination that fused with fire, making him his host. In fact, many terrible occurrences that caused widespread ruin in Haven was a result of the instigator's experiments, all the way from abominations that spawned to the Grinfall meteor, which, like the Gamma Calamity, was a chemical attack to infect his test subjects, also known as Haveners. On the screen playing, we see video footage of Kai Excalibur willingly and easily enduring the experiments being done to him. The Survey Day have performed various tests ranging from the basic blood tests to more abrasive and painful rituals and trauma-based operations, all proving to be inconclusive. However, the instigator never fails and knew there was something within Kai that could be and would be triggered. The frail lich presses his bony fingers against a button that brings up live surveillance of G1KE, also known as Kai Excalibur, standing within his quarters in front of a mirror. We cut to the inside of Fire's quarters, where we see him standing in the mirror observing himself, surprised at how much he had endured and still feels like a million bizquirks. The most durable of G-types would have succumbed to the trials. Fire wasn't sure if it was the entity inside him, the close proximity of his daughter Rose, or his own fiery soul that empowered him so much. Suddenly, Kai Excalibur hears a hissing voice over his shoulder. "Together, we are stronger." He turns around and sees no one, only Rose, sound asleep in her crib. Kai rubs his temples and walks over to an alien device that provides a water substitute that he uses to splash his face with, then looks up into the mirror and sees a man with a green flaming skull standing behind him in his reflection. Kai turns around with a fiery stroke of his arm, hurling a ball of fire into the alien facility's walls. Looking back into the mirror, the entity is still standing there, and at this point, Kai now understands that this must be what's inside of him, finally getting strong enough to reveal itself. Clouds of steam escapes from the entity's hissing mouth as it speaks. "Your fire sustains me, and I empower you." The entity moves closer behind Kai, placing its oily, tar-covered, oozing skeletal hands on his shoulders and whispers a secret about the Green Gods into his ear. It informs him that the planet is riddled with the spirits of past lives who wish they have had seized the opportunity to prove their effectiveness against the light. The entity erupts into green flames that fills the entire room. Kai drops to his knees in the green hellfire, its rage pulling Kai to the ground and breaking down his willpower. The entity shouts, "Let us truly become whole and destroy the light, proving we are the ultimate G-type before this life is over." Kai feels the immense aberrant power grow within him, the full power of the abomination fully blossoming. A small horde of cultists run up to Fire's quarters, but the room is so hot their clothes begin to catch on fire. The cultists, frightened that the instigator's prized specimen had potentially destroyed itself along with the baby. Using their combined takena, the congregation of cultists begin to generate a barrier to protect them from the heat as they open the door of what feels like a great oven. The flames begin to die down and the smoke clears. We hear the giggling and chuckling of baby Rose, and walking through it all, we see Kai Excalibur holding her in his arms. The instigator parts the horde of cultists and approaches the room to view Kai's complete form. Kai informs the instigator in extraordinary detail as to why his experiment didn't work and highlights the flaws in the procedures. The instigator, who had underestimated Kai's scientific intelligence, pretends to be humbled by his findings. However, everything going on within Fire was foreseen. The instigator escorts Kai down the corridors of the mysterious alien facility and prepares Kai for his next objective. He informs Kai that his role during the planet's destruction is to ensure that the light is not deterred from performing its function. When the light arrives, it will first wipe out the G1 RTX and then the entire planet. The instigator hands Kai a box containing schematics for a modified suit and states that he's sure Kai can make something useful from it. Kai glances over the intricate and advanced work of the instigator and immediately fills in the gaps with ideas of his own. Kai accepts the gift. The instigator tells him he will see him in the next life. Kai, somewhat confused by his cryptic message, nods and heads towards the labs to begin to prepare for the end of the world. We cut to K. McVeigh meditating in his private quarters within the alien facility. He is wearing the robes of the Finder, given to him, along with his title of Rasmussen's personal guard. The takena, flowing through its soft, velvety fabric, gives it a faint purple tint. General Rasmussen enters K's quarters and confirms that his next objective from the Green Gods is exactly what Rasmussen thought it would be. He explains to K that with his ability and power within the robes, he is to locate the realm between life and death where souls are transported to after humans perish, known as the Abyssal Realm, and where G1IB, otherwise known as Ivan Bakara, jumps between to and fro. Rasmussen wants K to locate it so that the Survey Day can capture and destroy not only Ivan, but also seize the realm and use it as another plane to harvest souls for the Ikermancer and the instigator's magical technology. K nods and begins to go into deep meditation as the takena flows through him and he feels a heavy pull on his own soul, akin to sinking into a deep, deep slumber. The takena forces him into an unconscious state where he feels the vastness of a network of life energy going to and from him like roots of a plant. He immediately understands the physics of the abyssal realm, as it is very similar to the ethereal plane, but much denser. K. McVeigh sees hundreds of abyssal beasts appearing around him, all shadowy and inconsistent in their shapes. However, it wasn't these beasts that sent a chill down K's spine. He feels another much larger presence, when suddenly he hears Ivan shout,
"Sip 'em, boy!"
as a giant, scaly, towering monstrosity with the features of a crocodile comes charging across the abyssal plains, its two massive tails and claws ripping through the rest of the abyssal beasts to get to K. McVeigh. K. McVeigh sees this and begins to finish up the last phase of his objective.
With swift, lightning speed hand gestures, K. McVeigh summons and plants a massive anchor, 30 stories tall, that comes falling from the sky of the realm and plunges deep within the ground, tethering K and the Survey Day to this realm. The impact causes a massive explosion of Takena, blowing every abyssal creature back, including the abyssal monstrosity. Utilizing his new Takena power merged with ethereal power, K has created and planted a soul conduit that immediately begins to sap the souls from the abyssal realm directly into himself, as well as back into the pipeline that the Ichormancer and the Survey Day pull from. K. McVeigh then places his hand on the conduit and vanishes from the realm, and is reawakened back in his body. K informs Rasmussen that it has been done and he is ready to invade the realm. Rasmussen smiles and places his hand on his shoulder. "Not yet," he says. "You have assumed the mantle of the Finder, and for that, you are deserving of your own army." His black soulless eyes looking into McKay's. The souls of the lost can be seen leaking out of Kay's vestments. We cut to the reception desk at St. Imelda's Infirmary for the Afflicted, a very prestigious hospital owned by Atlas Corp that is dedicated to helping people who were permanently damaged by their mutation or have suffered becoming an abomination partially. The doctors specialize in treating those who have been psychologically warped by powers or have had their bodies somehow altered into an unsavory form. The receptionist is leaning forward with his face dug into his phone, catching up on all the Ali's World videos that he had missed when he hears a raspy voice speak the secret code phrase, "Imelda's Rage." He looks up and sees Myrda, an old woman, tall and pale, cloaked in a heavy coat with long sleeves, her hands tucked in them, her wispy, reddish and graying hair tied up into a bun, staring down at him through her monocle. He immediately recognizes her as one of Atlas Corp's chief officers and rushes to prepare the latest batch of patients for her session. We cut to a large Imelda hospital room where we see 5 patients blindfolded, bound in straitjackets and handcuffed to their wheelchairs in a circle surrounding a small desk. We see X's carved into their necks as if marked. In walks Maeda with a laptop, followed by a nurse who doesn't step into the room but is seen shutting and vacuum sealing it. Myrda takes a seat at the desk, setting up her laptop. She begins catching up on all the news in Haven. Meanwhile, a fine gray mist begins to pour out of her coat and begins to fill the room as she surfs the news feeds. All of a sudden, her liquid screen ripples and goes blank. In fact, every device in Haven goes black and flickers until we get a crystal clear live feed of Anarchy 12 looking into the eyes of everyone in Haven. We see Tempest walking and talking on the phone until it ends the call and displays Anarchy on it and on the phones of all the students around him as well. We see Ryu Henshin wrapping up his sweep of the malware from the windows when he spots Anarchy's face on the Evolution District's massive screen that usually displays the stocks and Archon rates. Jeremiah squints his eyes, feeling like he should know this figure. He snaps his fingers and remembers that this is the robot guy that fought the Gamma Fiend with Tempest. He looks at Ryu and asks him if this guy is a big influence on him, with the whole techie thing he's got going. Ryu tries to hold back but can't contain it. Ryu excitedly informs Jeremiah that the swarm bots that Anarchy deployed prevented the Gamma Fiend from regenerating due to the nanosulfite spread during the explosion that devoured the mutant's skin cells, thus becoming an integral countermeasure in the final hour of their fight with the creature. Jeremiah, looking floored by Ryu's sudden outburst of fandom, turns his head back to the screen down in the city and takes a sip of his beverage and says to himself, Atlas, Swarm. Swarm Atlas. Atlas's Swarm. Swatless. The
unkillable bugs that kill. He buzzes his assistant and tells her to send that to his marketing team. We cut back to Imelda's infirmary with Mayra. She adjusts her monocle at her screen and tunes in to Anarchy's message to all of Haven. At this point, the room is now completely filled with her mist, and the patients begin to look agitated. Anarchy speaks. Good evening. My name is Anarchy 12, and for some time I've been active in our city's, let's say, darker activities, but recent events made me realize that there needs to be change. This is a city of wolves, and its residents have become sheep. It's killed or be killed. Natural selection in these streets, but you all hide behind these pathetic heroes. Heroes like the group of trash that reside at the Gate Center, or your precious governor advocate, who's been furthering my goal to create chaos unknowingly. Your governor has forgotten his place and attempted the most pathetic ruse I've ever seen. Anarchy begins to applaud mockingly. He promises peace and security. How? How can you depend on another to save and protect you instead of embracing your own power and awakening it? Anarchy slams his fist on the table in front of him. This message is for all of my brothers and sisters who are tired of being weak and dependent and want to live free, destroying and corrupting this city as they see fit. If you don't wish to see humanity grow and just want to rob, steal, and kill, then that's your business, and you may do so under my watch, my haven. Emerald Prophecy is here. You all see the light. Enter the Shade District in an hour or die, as nature intended you to do so. We see Anarchy walk over to a chair with a well-dressed man bound to it and a sack over his head. Anarchy pulls the bag off, revealing it's Governor Advocate, or as Anarchy knows him to actually be Cato V, unbeknownst to the public. Anarchy's suit warps a green 12-inch energy blade onto his forearm, and he plunges it into the back of Cato V's neck, his blue blood spraying and gushing all over the floors in the camera. Anarchy looks into the screen and says, "Natural selection," as he rips out his blade, almost taking off Advocate's head with it. Just as planned, the death of the new and beloved Governor Advocate flings the entire city into chaos. Every night skin all tapping into the same hive mind, acting on behalf of the Survey Day, begin to attack Haveners, and the ones that do not attack use their parasitic influence on others, which puts anger into their hearts and fire into their eyes for the death of their father over the live feed. The final orchestrated phase of chaos is commenced and carried out by the joint efforts of Anarchy 12 and Advocate as everyone attacks each other in the streets in a bloody rage. We see some of Haven's most predatory G-types begin making their way to the Shade District as directed by Anarchy for the promise of an anarchist's haven, killing people on their way there. We cut to Tempest, rushing through the halls of the Gate Center and into Judge Benedict's quarters, still recovering from his demonic transformation, rendering him paralyzed from the neck down. Sitting beside Judge Benedict is his star student, Chronicle, the young white-haired G-type who assisted Tempest during the battle with the Gamma Fiend. Tempest approaches and Chronicle salutes him. Tempest informs Judge of Anarchy's ploy and the chaos it is causing. He then asks Judge who he believes could lead a team in place of himself. Judge struggles to speak but manages to inform Tempest that Chronicle is the man for the job. Judge explains that Chronicle is a leader of leaders and can be trusted with your life. Tempest senses the amount of confidence behind Judge's judgment and looks at Chronicle. Tempest extends his hand and shakes Chronicle's, telling him to prepare. Chronicle, excited, maintains his composure and thanks Judge and Tempest for the opportunity. We see Mayada, shocked at these events. She closes her laptop and finishes up her 7th Atlas Stamina brand peanut butter and chocolate energy bar, engineered to keep you going for days on end, and ultimately the reason why her organization Atlas Corp bought the candy company way back when. Behind her, we see the bound patients thrashing about like raging lunatics driven mad by Mayada's rage mist. She inhales deeply as she begins to feel the epiphanies fall on her brain from the new assortment of skills she had just sapped from her victims using her hate feed ability, a side effect of her rage mist that grants her the ability to mimic her victims' physical skills as well as their knowledge for the duration of their insanity. After the mist settles, the nurses open the door and begin dragging out the patients, when suddenly a bolt of Takena energy whizzes through the hallway, blowing off the torso of one of the nurses. Mayada, with her newfound knack for positioning and stealthiness, moves up to the doorway and peeks around the corner. Standing down the hallway, she sees K. McVeigh, the Survey Finder, with 2 elite Survey cultists. He turns his head in her direction, just missing her. K. McVeigh commands the cultists to kill everyone in the hospital as he walks through the hallways like a walking soul rapture as tons of souls from the abyssal realm flow through him and then into the bodies of the dead, reanimating them. Mayada looks around the room for a way to escape and spots a vent. Without really knowing what skills she may possess until she performs them, she usually went in blind. However, it became apparent that she knew what skills her victims possessed this time around, as they had been marked by her previously. The arrangement of angles between the desk and chairs became incredibly obvious due to her new parkour knowledge. Mayada dashes toward the desk and with ease vaults herself up into the vents and flees the premises as K. McVeigh comes phasing through the wall, barely missing her again. We see the dead rise from their Imelda hospital beds and morgue tables, joining the legions of the dead caught up in K. McVeigh's Takena rapture. We see Looper Ken neck deep in paperwork and statements at his desk within the WWC. His choice, though. Most of the WWC had no time to deal with cases involving G-types. There were always more urgent issues at hand, and usually the G-type ones solved themselves, resulting in a dead G-type, but it was usually one of those G-types everyone knew was better off dead for everyone's safety. Which is why Looper is spending his night checking and cross-checking Virus Baseborn's face along with the caretaker's profiles. Looper looks for anything to give him a clue and a new lead. This was outright assault, murder, attempted murder, public disturbance. Hell, he was even sure there was a sniper somewhere, an ever-watching eye. Maybe he could add discharging of a deadly weapon to the growing list of charges. Thankfully, the family also caught in the crossfire had made it out okay, except for the eldest son now taking a dirt nap. Looper calls it a night and heads home, turning off all the screens in the station just as Anarchy's public service announcement begins. Looper pulls up to his Western Ward apartment. No radio tonight. It seems like everything at this moment was making his wounds from his skirmish ache. Besides, some weird person was talking the whole time in place of his usual tunes, so he turned it off. Looper trudges through his apartment's corridors. The sound of Governor Advocate being executed on live television can be heard blasting from every tenant's living room. However, Looper was still oblivious to it. Looper pulls a bottle of orange soda from the fridge and crashes on the couch, completely forgetting about one particular injury, the stab wounds. He would have screamed, but didn't even have the energy for that. Looper endures the pain, takes a big swig of his drink, and begins to doze off, dropping and spilling the soda all over the floor. We see Virus Baseborn driving a massive truck shipment full of slaves that he had hijacked on the way from Sector 12 heading toward the Shade District by being privy to all of the caretaker's hidden routes that he acquired from the phone he stole in his last encounter with the caretakers and is now posing as one. The Shade District is a slum on the south side of Haven. Due to its countless towering slum apartments and homicide-spawning overpasses, the majority of the district receives little to no sunlight, so it was deemed unpopular and generally ignored by any government funding. Law enforcement in this area is rare and only spared for when massive civil unrest occurs. Poverty and crime are high, to say the least, and comes with the environment. They say if you were caught in the Shade District and don't live there, you're looking for drugs, sex, illegal weapons, or just death. We see a large bag of swords, guns, ammo, supplies, and various pieces of equipment recently purchased from Sector 12's black market in the passenger seat by Virus. It appears that he was here looking for death. Virus walks down an alleyway passing many shady figures when a large thug passes by him and purposely shoulder checks him. He and Virus make eye contact as they both continue to walk, but the man stops and sizes up Virus.
Hey, yo, what's up?
Annoyed by the shove and the man now stopping, Virus comes to a stop as well and looks back at him, squaring his eyes as if to say,
We're gonna do this?
The man continues to walk. Virus approaches a door and does a special knock, which is met by a person sliding open a slit in the door and asks for Virus's shipment number. Virus looks down at the note he scribbled and gives the number. The man behind the door tells him to bring the shipment around to the back of the building, and so he does. A half hour goes by and we see Virus waiting. 2 parties of 5 exit the building, one being the caretaker shot caller Virus is here for, along with his goons, and the other a group of green-hooded Survey Day cultists, each wearing similar advanced armor we've seen on the Instigator, and they are carrying an odd-looking box. Virus squints. According to what he learned of the caretakers, they often sell and trade on the black market and are likely trading all these slaves in his truck for whatever's in the box. Virus gets out of the truck purposely, making his presence known to speed them up. They see him and begin making their way toward the truck and the shipment. The caretaker shot caller commands Virus to open up the back of the truck to show the cultists their goods. Virus does so, and we see no more than 50 older women and their babies, maybe with a dozen young men mixed in, all crammed into the back of the truck, terrified. Virus attempts to hide his disgust. See, it's all there. Now, the sooner you hand that box over, the less chance your boss finds out, eh? It's true. It appears this group of cultists have made a living selling off Survey Day artifacts into the black market and are attempting to get this artifact off of their hands in exchange for Haveners to eat. The cultist hands the caretaker the box and they shake hands. When suddenly, a razor-sharp knife is jammed through both of their hands, skewering them together. The cultist, in pain and in shock, looks up and sees a lean young man no older than 20 in a gray hoodie with messy black hair standing beside the caretaker, putting him in an arm lock and forcing his gun to be aimed at the cultist. His mugger was none other than Timbrous Gray. Most would call him a damn thief, but no one has ever actually witnessed him lifting a damn thing. These things just always went missing. Timbrous maneuvers behind the caretaker and snatches the box from him and then completely vanishes with it. The caretaker has one of his goons come remove the knife from his and the cultist's hand while cursing and accusing the cultist of a setup. The lead cultist's Magitech armor begins to glow as he and his entourage become angered, removing their glowing hands from their robes. The caretakers tighten the grip on their guns. Virus realizes that the scenario has completely changed. He has a truck full of slaves and still has to figure out where they are keeping the rest. He can't let the leader die, yet. Virus prepares to blow his cover. We cut to Timbrous Gray, zooming through the streets of the Shade District on a motorcycle that he's borrowing. He looks to be in a rush to exit the district. Timbrous thinks to himself that he's going crazy, but it feels right. He looks down for a moment and opens the box to see if his intense moment of deja vu is still in effect. And lo and behold, sitting inside the odd box is a strange, spherical and glowing object, just like he felt it would be. The clairvoyance brought on by the intense power of this object causes Timbrous to feel as if he lived this moment many times before. From the moment he heard of the scheduled meeting between the caretakers and the cultists, to now, needing to escape the Shade District and head somewhere that he cannot recall before it's too late. Timbrous slams on his brakes and comes to a complete stop when he realizes he forgot something. We cut back to Virus Baseborn with his blade in the back of a cultist, using it as cover from gunfire and Takena bolts. Virus lifts up the dead bodies all around him using his telekinesis to form a wall of them as he begins to engage the remaining few. One of the caretakers goes to flank Virus Baseborn when suddenly Timbrous Gray appears in front of him, sending a body blow to his ribs, then grapples his gun and they both begin to struggle over it. Timbrous sets his gaze on the man, causing him to go blind, then reaches into the caretaker's pocket to retrieve what he had came back for, his knife. After pulling it out, he stabs him 7 times in the stomach until he stops fighting back, and Timbrous pushes him to the ground. With his enhanced instincts and reflexes, Timbrous is able to dictate which one of the caretakers will likely aim their gun at him next. He fixes his gaze on the gunmen just as they are turning their head, causing them to go blind as well, losing sight of the battlefield. Timbrous closes the distance and tackles him to the ground, smacking away his gun and jamming his knife into the caretaker's neck repeatedly. Timbrous was all too familiar with the caretakers, once being a hostage himself after they snatched him up when he was a child surviving in the streets alone. Timbrous couldn't shake the feeling that he also knew who the other particular cultist was that he stole the artifact from. Perhaps it was the deja vu triggered by the stone. We cut to the leader of the caretakers running for his life into his base, leaping over furniture and making sharp turns through the corners within his home, headed straight to the panic room upstairs. Just as he reaches the middle of the steps, a thick sheet of ice forms under him, causing him to slip and break his face on the ice as he slides back down to the base of the stairs. Virus Baseborn walks up to him, sword in hand, and places his boot on his chest, holding him down. Where are the slaves? The caretaker, holding his mouth, begins to deny knowledge of such things. Virus holds his sword out and ignites it in flames and plunges it into the caretaker's inner thigh, right into the bone. He lets loose a high-pitched scream echoing throughout the building. We see Timbrous running back over to his motorcycle, the sense of urgency growing even more. He gets on the bike, he turns and takes one last look at the cultist and begins to remember. The combination of the cultist's face and the color of his robes begin to remind Timbrous of the end of the world for some reason. We see Virus Baseborn torturing the caretaker for information on the slaves' whereabouts when Timbrous shouts, "Hey!" Virus immediately rolls behind the sofa for cover, then summons a ball of fire and using his telekinesis sends it flying at Timbrous. Timbrous manages to evade it by also rolling and moving out of the way. Timbrous shouts, informing Virus he is not an enemy. The fireball comes flying around the living room, bursting right through the sofa, barely missing Timbrous, who backflips onto the table, then dives and hides. Timbrous, hesitant to shout again, begins to wonder if this guy is worth saving. Holy shit. It wasn't even like
he could explain to him what he's saving him from. As Timbers sits and thinks, a ball of floating ice comes hovering quietly around the corner, sneaking up on him. Timbers, caught off guard, sees his reflection in the ice ball when suddenly the fireball comes busting through the wall, hitting Timbers' arm, causing him to stumble back and right into Virus Baseborn, who reaches for his neck but goes completely blind and as a result stumbles forward, confused. Timbers uses this opportunity to explain to him that they have to leave the Shade District like yesterday. Virus shouts, asking him what has he done to his sight. Timbers brings the light back into his eyes. Virus's vision returns, and he sees Timbers standing before him, holding the alien object out in front of him. Virus is hit by a wave of knowing and is overcome with deja vu. He doesn't understand why or how, but leaving feels like the only right thing to do, and that the world is indeed ending. Virus tells Timbers he has to save the children first. Timbers tells him that the world is ending and that they might be better off inside this building, and pulls Virus's arm, but Virus pulls back. We cut to Virus and Timbers speeding through the Shade District in a truck filled with all of the rescued slaves while passing hundreds of G-types, answering Anarchy's call, all congregating where they were told to. Suddenly, the sky lights up with a massive explosion of green flames, and we see Kai Excalibur, also known as Fire, descend from a gateway in the sky and begins hovering over the city as if waiting for something. We cut to the instigator in front of his monitors. He patches in Anarchy 12 and says, "It's time." We then see Anarchy's floating base, currently sitting nestled in the center of Sector 12, release droves and droves of emerald swarmbots all over the entire city of Haven that begin to spread a toxin created by the instigator that sends everyone into an irrational delirium, a state of confusion and fear. Fire adds to the chaos by hurling fireballs the size of great asteroids into the city, causing widespread ruin, just as planned. Tempest and Virus swerve to avoid a giant ball of fire that destroys an entire intersection, ultimately sending their trucks flying up and into the 5th-story wall of a building, leaving them stuck. A loud explosion is heard right outside of Looper's apartment as the bright reds and oranges come shining through his window. Looper, startled and not knowing what's going on, wakes up wide-eyed from his sleep. It sounded like giant fireballs raining from the sky, demolishing the apartments across the street, but Looper couldn't be too sure unless he checked for himself. Just before he gets up to check, the entire front door to his apartment gets crushed and balled up into the size of an apple and lands into the hands of a very familiar-looking Dorinthian man, Noxious Wong, standing with a horde of caretakers, all with their Tommy guns pointed into Looper's apartment and at him on his little old couch. Word had it that Noxious Wong had muscled his way into the Western Ward along with 5 of his brothers a few years back. At first they had been ignored, but soon after the Gamma Calamity, Noxious had started throwing his weight and powers around. In an instant, Noxious Wong and his brothers had taken over a quarter of the 13th District. Soon, they had faced off against the caretakers, and in neither winning or losing, had come to make a tentative alliance. Looper was guessing that alliance was about to take a sharp turn, considering he was pretty sure he'd seen one of the lead caretakers take an icicle into the head, choking on his own blood. They all begin to let their guns rip as Looper, without thinking of his moves, leaps behind the couch, landing hard on his bad side as the bullets shred up the furniture and everything else in the apartment. Looper knows the sofa won't last long, and with the drop that they just got on him, he wouldn't be able to face Noxious Wong and the Wang Gang under these conditions. Looper leaps up to his feet and dashes towards the window, using the sofa to vault right through it, his heavy brick-ass body flying from a 6-story building and landing onto the top of a vehicle. Looper blinks out for about 20 seconds or so before coming back to consciousness and peeling himself off of the roof of the vehicle. However, when he sits up, he sees such an apocalyptic landscape that he wonders how none of this has been broadcasted on the radio or television. The sky is filled with a strange mist. A G-type composed of red and green fire is hurling meteors at civilians, and people are in the middle of the street ripping each other's faces off, brutally mutilating each other. Looper gets off of the car and begins to run down the street to get a better view. A maniacal woman runs up to him with a knife, screaming, "You killed my father!" and lunges at him. Looper grabs her arm, holding back the knife. He sees in her eyes that they are completely bloodshot, as if she was high on some kind of drug. Looper pulls the knife from her and tosses her to the ground, but she comes right back at him and begins biting him, breaking her own teeth in the process. It was at this point he knew something wasn't right with her, and he whacks her over the head with his forearm, neutralizing her. Looper carries her over to the sidewalk when suddenly the light in the sky flashes and instantly blinks toward the city and is now floating just above the city, almost blinding everyone looking at it. Looper's eyes especially are affected by the intensity of the radiance. The light begins to dim slowly, revealing that the light is not a light at all, or a meteor, but rather a large 8-foot-tall giant man with no facial features, eyes, mouth, ears, nothing, just a blank slate. Its body stacked with muscles, its pale skin glowing white hot as a network of green veins can be seen glowing under the entirety of its body. It turns its head slow in one specific direction and begins moving into that direction. Fire, amazed at the arrival of the light, as he too assumed it would be some sort of celestial body crashing into the planet. The entity within him beckons him to attack. It's our time to show that we are the stronger. All the cultists in the Survey Day begin weeping at the sight of the light. Anarchy 12 looks all around him and watches as the cultists drop to their knees, crying in remorse over their failure to produce a suitable G-type, and now lament in the fact that they will be destroyed once again. The instigator sees Anarchy in deep thought and tells Anarchy 12 not to be worried, for he will be spared as promised. Anarchy 12 asks the instigator what that thing is. The instigator turns to him, smiles, and says, "The erase button." Anarchy 12 turns and looks at the screen, marveling at the godly being, when suddenly someone or something whispers an invitation into his ear. An invitation to exchange knowledge for assistance with creating true anarchy in Haven. Anarchy turns around, then back around, seeing no one. The King android doesn't pick up anything either. Whatever it was, it leaves the invitation open for a meeting, and all he has to do is say the word. We cut back to all of Haven. We begin to hear the instigator's voice ring all throughout the skies like God's voice from the heavens. You all have failed yet again, and the green gods are not pleased with what you have created in this batch. As promised, you will be given yet another chance. Now accept the light of your errors. Thanks for watching Peoplz and Dragons, the interactive RPG game show. I encourage everyone to jump into our comment section to participate in the lore contests, as well as visit our Patreon page to learn what perks come with your support for our machine. Peace.